All right, now I hit record. This is why I need help, guys, because I don't stay on top of things like this. So it's my little ADHD brain going about 10 different directions. All right, quick introduction. Welcome to the second class in the Introduction to Sketchup. Today we're working on moving things around, designing parts and moving them in off axes with quick tips and tricks. And we're going to do some basic navigation of the toolbar. So to get things started, today we're going to build a bench in SketchUp. We're going to move our legs so they're off axes and a few other components, and we're going to use that to show you guys how to do some fun stuff to make moving stuff around easy, simple, and fun. All right, so let's see here. Let's go ahead and go. Right now I'm in, for those of you who are just jumping in, I changed the background style. Like in the last class, you remember it was blue. I simply went up to Windows, down to the engineering style on the drop down, and clicked on that, which gives me a white background, which is what I prefer when I am modeling. It will also make the parts that I build either white on one face and blue on other faces. Now, if they're blue on one face, it means there's a part missing, and we'll talk about if it happens. So to get things started, I'm just going to make the top of my bench. And to make the top of my bench, it's going to be 18 inches deep, and I'm going to hit that. I'm just going to draw out my rectangle, just leave it sitting there in mid-space. I'm going to enter 18 inches, comma, which is just like saying by. You'll hear me say that in today. If I say 18 by, you know, by means I just hit the comma, by 52, enter. And then I'm going to hit the P for the push-pull button, and I'm going to draw it up and hit 1 on the keyboard. That indicates 1 inch, and that just get right. Let me do that again. Push-pull 1, enter. Why is my number pad? It helps if your number pad's locked. I'm in the wrong model here, guys. Hang on a second. Can't see my buttons. Jesse, I'm going to turn the questions right off so I can see my my distances. So if anybody asks a question, will you please just speak up and let me know?
Yeah, I got it.
Thank you. All right, back to where we were. Push rectangle, 18, comma, 52, enter. Zoom in here because I'm way off. I'm going to change that. So we're going to do 52 because I'm backwards again. So 52, comma, 18, enter. That's going to put our top in the orientation that I want it. P for push-pull. Pull it in the direction you want it. 1 for 1 inch, enter. That's going to give us an 18 inch by 52 inch by 1 inch top. Now, if I was done here, I would just triple click it and make it a component. And now I can't edit that anymore unless I explode it so I can edit it. I want to go ahead and edit it because I want a bull nose around all 4 sides. So I'm going to click on it, left key or right mouse, explode. That makes this whole thing back into modeling space. So I want a bull nose on this, so I'm going to take my tape measure by hitting T on the keyboard, grabbing that edge, drawing it back, and then I'm going to type into the keypad 0.5, which is a ½ an inch, and that'll leave it marked there. I'm hitting A for arch. Draw that from corner to corner on the edge, go back to center, and I want to pull it out just so it doesn't quite touch the edge there. If I closed that gap and then it did a follow me, it would do the top and then the bottom separately. So I'm going to leave just a little gap there. I can get rid of that line. And I'm going to select the surface that I want the follow me tool to go around, which is the top surface, because I want the follow me tool to go around all 4 edges. And I go up to tools, and then I'm going to select follow me, and then I'm going to come back down in here. Let's zoom in on that, and just with the left mouse button hit that, and it just put a bull nose all the way around our top surface. Did everybody get that? Okay, now that I've got that done, I'm going to go ahead and select it again by hitting the mouse 3 times, triple click, left mouse, make component. So now I have taken that and locked it. It is no longer in modeling space. Next thing I want to do is mark a position for the legs on the bottom here. So I'm going to go from where the bull nose stops right to the surface and grab that edge with the tape measure. So T for tape measure. Grab that edge, I'm going to pull it to the direction I want it to go, and I'm going to say 3 inches, so hitting 3 on the keyboard, hitting enter, and that's going to give me a point right there where I want to draw out the leg. So I also want to do some distances from the sides, so I'm going to grab a hold of that. I'm going to come in 1 inch, tape measure again, grab a hold of that, pull to the direction I want, hit 1 on the keyboard, hit enter, that gives me a 1 inch offset. Okay, in this case, I know that I want my leg to be 1 1/4 inches thick, so I'm just going to go ahead and add that now. T for tape measure, pull the direction I want it. I'm hitting 1.25 on the keyboard and enter. So that gives me basically just a shape that I want to build a rectangle around. So R for rectangle, and draw that to those corners. And I'm going to hit the push-pull, P for push-pull, and I'm going to pull it up to 18 inches. Or in this case, let's go 17.5. 17.5 on the keyboard, hit enter. That's too thick. So I don't like that. Let's go back to 1 inch. So it was 1.25, so I'm just going to go push-pull, pull it, push it in the direction I want it, 0.25. That's going to give me a 1 inch thick leg. That's much better. Okay. Now, when you're using modeling like this, one of the things that's really cool about what's possible is you can model, if you have components that are the same, like if you're building a table and it has 4 legs and the 4 legs are all the same, you can model one leg all the way through it, and then you can use that and duplicate it on each of the other 4 corners. So in this case, we have 2 legs. So we're going to just do one, we're going to design one leg and get it all the way we want it before we move it to the other side. So one thing I am going to do, though, is remember, because I know that's fresh in my head, that was a 3 inch offset, so I'm going to T for tape measure, pull the direction I want, hit 3 on the keyboard, hit enter, and that's going to give me the position for the other leg when I get ready to move it over there. So now for these lines, I can get rid of them. Now, one of the first things I want to do, this is a farm style bench, so I want to have a taper from here down to, like right here. Okay, and then I want to have a nice little V groove cut out in the edge that's got a kind of an arch to it. All right, well, I also want this to be at a 7-degree angle, so it's not going to sit square with the world. It's actually going to have, it's going to lean to the back 7 degrees. Now, this is really easy to do right now, but once we have all these different components or cutouts built into this, we can't push-pull this. So if I was in this position and I wanted it at 7 degrees, I would just hit, actually, this is a new tool here. I'd go to Draw, or excuse me, Tools, hit Protractor, grab an edge there, go straight across, mark that indication line there, and then I would pull down on it the direction I wanted the cutout and hit 7, and that's for 7 degrees, and it would automatically go to 7 degrees. And at that point, I could just use that as a reference, hit L for line, from corner to point there, and then the push-pull tool, and that's going to give me my 7-degree angle. But since we have all this other stuff going on, that's not going to work in this case. So let's go ahead and do this the right way here. So first of all, I want a 1 1/4 inch offset from top to bottom. So T for tape measure, pulling to the direction I want, 1.25, enter. Same on the other side. T for tape measure, 1.25, enter. And then I want to find the center point of this. So just grab any outer edge, put the tape measure close to the line. When it turns blue, it lets you know that you're in center rather than having to try and measure that out. I also want an arch in there, and I want it to come down to, well, let's say about 10 inches. So pull the T for tape measure, pull it down, and about 10 inches. Okay, now this right here is going to be the outside of the leg. This is going to be the outside of the leg here. So at this point, let me go ahead and draw those out so I'm not, the next step doesn't confuse me. So I want that to be there, and that to go here. Now before I pull this out of here, let me show you this. This is one of the things that always helps when you're using SketchUp or any 3D modeling program, is to try to think a little bit ahead. Now if I were to just erase that right now, let me show you, and I draw a line from this point, or tape measure off from this side here, you see how that measurement is going to be at the same angle I just cut off? Well, which is fine, which is really okay in this case, but I want a nice straight 3 inches. So I want to come in from that corner 3 inches, and this will make sense in a second. T for tape measure, pull in 3 on the keyboard for 3 inches, enter, and I'm going to do the same for this side. Okay, I just want this dimension here to be an exact 3 inches. So now I've got that done, I can get rid of this. So I'm going to push-pull these out of the way. So P on the keyboard for push-pull. And then when you do a push-pull, you can either type in the dimension, like I know this is 1 inch thick, so I can just push-pull 1, enter, or you can just go ahead and grab the surface, push-pull it till it stops on the outside edge of where you want to go, and it'll automatically erase that. All right, so the next thing I want to do is create this arch in the center of this. So A for arch on the keyboard, grab my 3 inch measurement, go down to that intersection, and in this case I want like a 3/4 inch arch, so I'm going to hit 0.75 on the keyboard, enter, and do the same thing on the opposite side. So there we go. And then pull in the direction I want, 0.3 or 0.75, enter, and that's going to give me a 3/4 inch arch. So from this point to this point, the center of that arch is 3/4 inches high if you had a straight line. Push-pull, P on the keyboard, just pull it off till it ends up, and now we've got the basic shape of our farm style leg. So let's get rid of some of these dimensions here, or these measurements here. Now the next thing we need to do is create the 7-degree bevel on both the top and the bottom. So before we do that, let's go ahead and make this a component real quick. This is a part of the process. Make the piece a component. To do that, again, triple click on the component until everything is lit up in blue and you see the polka dots everywhere. Hit the left mouse, and then you get a drop-down menu. Just pick the make the component. And the reason I did that is because I'm going to draw a rectangle on the top here. I just went from corner to corner there. And in this case, I got to remember that the leg is going to lead out at the bottom, so I need the angle to be this way, to your right. So I'm going to grab this move tool, and I'm going to pull that rectangle we just made out a little bit.
Question, Izzy.
Yep.
It says, did it not select the other part because it was already a component?
Yes. That's why I made, if you're talking about the leg, that's why I made it a component, because I have to model on top of this. Now if I had left it in modeling space and not made it a component and drew this arch on it, everything would stick to it. So every time I tried to move this around, the two pieces would try to move together, if that makes sense. They would get all funky.
Addendum to the question, he says the seat of the bench.
Oh yeah, it is a component, and the reason it is a component is because I'm using that as a surface to model on. So I didn't want anything I design on top of that. will stick to it if it's not a component or a group. So I made it a component. So that way everything we model on it, we can move around without it getting stuck. Think of it like glue. If you leave a model in modeling space without making a component, which basically takes it out of modeling space, which means, okay, I'm done with this part. Now you want to add something to it, like say you wanted to add a leg to it, it would be basically like taking that leg and gluing it right to that part, and every time you tried to move that part or modify that part, it would also modify the seat as well. So making it a component completely takes it out of the game. You know, you can't do anything to it unless you explode it or triple click on it to edit it. So that's why I did that. But what's nice about this, because the bench is there, it's already a surface that I can use. So I can use that surface as a reference point for all my measurements. I can also use that surface like to lay my legs out on or lay the apron out on or anything like that. It's a nice solid surface to work on. Okay. So to recap here, I made the leg that we're working on a component. And the reason I did that is because I want to draw this rectangle on top here, and I don't want it to stick to it. So I'm going to move this, but in order to do that, I'm going to make that a component really quick. So I make that a component as well. And now I'm going to use Q, that's for rotate. And I'm going to grab the edge of that, and then I'm just going to pull down on it, and I'm going to hit 7, enter. That's going to make that 7, that makes that angle 7. So, or 7 degrees. So now I'm going to explode both of these. I'm going to go through and explode the little flat piece there. We're using that basically as a knife. And I'm going to explode the leg. So now these two components are both exploded and in modeling space. Anytime you have a weird angle or something odd that you need to do, that there's no real good way to do it, using this cutting technique is fast. Once you get used to the idea, it's super fast. It's basically like you just pull out this flat knife, intersect it into the part that you want to change in the position that you want to change it in or cut away, and then just triple click on everything, which selects the whole part. That's the flat part and the leg. Right mouse and go down to intersecting faces, and in this case I'm going to hit with selection. So what that did is basically it used this as a knife and it cut everything along there. So now all I have to do is go ahead and erase the parts. There. Now the reason I had to do it that way is because instead of just creating an angle on the leg and push pulling, well, it's because we have an angle here and we have an arch here. And anytime you have an angle with anything that's not a flat surface, if it's round or there's an angle or there's an arch to it, you can't push pull through it. It won't let you. So you have to create that little flat element and treat it like a knife and use intersecting faces to get the angle that you want. All right, so we're going to do the same thing. Before we go any further, I have to move this around. So if I were to use my Q tool, you know what, actually let's go ahead and wait on that one. It'll make more sense if I do it all at one time. So now we need to do the same thing to this surface here, the top. We need to put the angle on it so we can actually lean it back 7 degrees. So to do that, I'm going to go ahead and click on the top itself that we made earlier, and I'm going to hide that. So I'm going to left click, right click, and go to hide up there in the drop down menu and just hide it. And same thing, it's the exact same procedure as before. Start by making sure this is a component, triple click, right click, drop down menu, make component. And then I'm going to make sure I can make my angle right, so the angle needs to be this way. So, okay, rectangle. Now in this case, I want to select that outer edge, and I want to move this out a little bit, because if you remember that the side of it is at an angle. So if I were just to leave it square and move it down, it wouldn't cut all the way through the piece. And I'm going to go through and select each one of the edges that I need to move out a little bit. So move that edge out a little bit. and move this edge out a bit. Now remember, anytime you do something that you don't want to do, just hit Escape or Control Z for back. Alright, so that's now right. Okay. Again, make that part a component. So now I've made my knife. We're going to call this a knife edge. And then I've made the knife component, the leg a component, and I'm going to move that into the position I want. So I'm going to hit the Q button. Again, just follow it out on the edge, move it down, and hit 7 for 7 degrees, and that's made it cut through. So now, the reason I extended the sides, guys, is if I hadn't, the original square would not cut all the way through this edge. It would kind of be back in here a little bit, if that makes sense. So I pulled out the side a little bit to make sure it cut all the way through. So now we just have to go through, and we can do that simply by selecting the part, by clicking right or left clicking the mouse, right clicking the mouse, and explode it. Same thing on the leg. Left click, right click, explode. So now these are both back in modeling space. Triple click on the parts until they all light up in blue. Right click, go to intersecting faces with selection, and then just start erasing the parts you don't want. So that's all there is to it. And the one thing to always remember when you do this is to always look on those edges for those small pieces that are easy to forget. All right, that's pretty much what we want. So one thing I'm going to do before I make this a component again is I am wanting to move this. So if I were to go ahead and say Q for rotate and grab a hold of this edge, watch what happens. Oops, let me select the whole part here. Q for rotate, select this edge. Watch what happens. It doesn't move entirely in the space correctly because it's at an angle, so it kind of gets skewed really quickly. So you need a parallel surface to the angle you want to move. In other words, if I wanted this thing to just lean straight back or straight forward, I have to have a parallel edge. If it's at an angle like we created earlier, it won't move at an angle. It'll actually move off axes. So a very simple, very cool trick to know is to create a parallel edge, and you can do that just by adding a line. And this is typically how I will move stuff around in space that is off axis. Just create a line there, and then I'll make sure I create another line. Now I can tell that this line is parallel. This is on blue axes, and the line lights up in blue. Everybody see that? So that is now, that indicates that, you know, that this part is parallel to the green, red, and blue axes. So I'm going to go ahead and create that little extra component on this part, and that's going to be how I move this around and keep it parallel in space. So let's go ahead and make that a component. I'm going to make it a component with that. If I want to come back and do sexy shots of it or like make plan sets with it, I can always erase that later just by, you know, unselecting, or just by exploding the component and then just erasing it and making it a component again. But in the meantime, really handy to have for moving around. So now I need to tilt this leg 7 degrees back. So I hit Q on the keyboard for move or for rotate. I can come to that axis there and just pull down on it. And you see how my protractor there is still green? That means that my protractor is on the green parallel in modeling space. So I know that that is exactly where I want it to be because it's in that same plane as the red axis or green axis. So now I just click on that and I can move. I'm going to pull to the right in this case, hit 7 on my keyboard and enter, and that is going to move the entire leg to a 7-degree angle, and it moved it perfectly in parallel with the planes that we're working with and not skewed off. So just a nice little tip, a little trick to know when you're trying to move parts that don't have, you know, flat parallel edges out in the world. So what I'm going to do now is bring my bench top back. To do that, I'm going to hit Edit up on the menu. When it comes down to the drop down, hit Unhide And in this case, I can just hit unhide all, or you can hit unhide last. I'm just going to hit unhide all. And now you can see that my bench seat is back and my leg is parallel with the bench seat on the 7-degree axes, and everything is just like it should be. Any questions at this point? Did that make sense to everybody?
No questions right now.
Okay, good. All right, so now I need to make a duplicate leg and put it over on this side of the bench. To do that, I'm just going to go back over. Apparently I erased my line, so I'm going to go back and hit this edge, hit a T for tape measure, pull it in the direction I want, hit 3 on my keyboard and enter. That's going to move it over 3 inches. Now, just so you guys, if you remember, we moved this in 3 inches, so 3, enter. You see how the back part of the leg is on that 3-inch mark? So we want to keep that similar over here. Now, to make sure I have my position right, I'm going to go ahead and grab the tape measure and that line, and I'm going to pull right up to that point. That way I have a point over in this corner, and that right now it tells me that this corner and this corner are the same. So if I move this over there and then flip the axes on this, I can get that right exactly where I want it on the other side. So I'm going to move that. I'm going to hit the M for move. I selected the part, M for move, and then as I'm moving it, hit Control, and Control just makes a copy of the part. So I'm going to go ahead and rotate that, hit it right on that edge over there. Now obviously it's not leaning the right way, so we need to move this. Now here's something fun. Watch what happens when you just rotate it. See that? Didn't help us much, did it? See what's going on, guys? So in order to get that, we have to select the part, go to flip along, and in this case we want to flip along red. And now we can rotate the part just by hitting move. Wait for those red arrows to show up. Oh, I did it wrong again. Oh, that's what I'm doing. Sorry, guys. Let's go back to where I was here. I was going to show you guys a neat little problem, but I ended up fooling my own self. Go figure that. Okay, so put it on there. Now we need to turn this in modeling space so it is, exactly the opposite of this. Now normally you can just click on a part and hit the mouse button, select it, hit mouse, and then you can say flip along axes. So it doesn't work in this case. It just changes the angle on the top. It just says it's just turning the part inside out. So that's not going to help us. So in order to get this thing right, we have to actually turn this thing on its axes. So I'm going to hide the top. And I'm going to go ahead and select this component. And I'm going to hit Q for rotate. I'm going to grab that upper edge right there, making sure that I am on the blue plane. You see how I don't know if you can see that or not, but you can. The protractor is blue. That means I am on the proper plane, and I know that 7-degree top is a parallel plane, so it's flat on the red and green axes. So I just basically flip that part completely around and unhide the top. Now I can select that part again and hit move, and I can move it to its proper position. Now we got to grab that bottom lower corner, stick it right there, and now we have both legs in the right position. So whenever you're moving stuff around in the space that's off axis, not straight up and down, or like one edge has an angle, the other edge has an arch or something like that, it can be a little bit tricky moving it around or making copies of it and positioning them in 3D modeling space. So having things like this little kicker right here, which is parallel to the modeling space, so that's actually parallel to the blue axes, really helps because especially if you get turned around or get lost, you can always come back and reference that, and you know that you can move that to the right, to the proper parallel in the modeling space. So now we've got our bench top and legs made. So we're going to make an apron for this, and real simple. Instead of trying to measure it out in the world, I'm just going to go ahead and grab the tape mark that's already there. I'm going to go ahead and pull it 1 inch, enter, and then create a rectangle. It doesn't have to be on, in this case I don't have to do anything fancy. It doesn't even have to be a proper size. I'm going to push pull to 6 inches, so P for push pull, 6 on the keyboard, enter. That's going to make it 6 inches tall. And then I'm just going to go ahead and grab a hold of this and pull it right through our model. And do the same thing over here. So what that's done now is giving me a point of reference, so I know that's where it comes through. I can actually just hit line, L on the keyboard for line, follow that edge, and that's created a line along that, a cut line along that, so push pull. Oh, I guess it would be helpful if I indicated it. That's why. So if you end up with a little problem like that, you're not cutting right through the surface, just push pull it back, because if you have two edges that are next to each other and you're using this little cheater shortcut, it can get a little bit tricky. Just want to make sure that you're hitting that. So basically I just use that, the angle of the leg as a reference point for my cut line, instead of trying to measure it out and actually adding the 7-degree angle and all that stuff to it. Same thing over here. I hope is this making sense to everybody? You understand why the first time I grabbed it, it didn't work, and I had to come back. I had this edge and this edge too close to each other, so the line couldn't actually snap to a part. It didn't know where it was supposed to snap to, so it probably snapped to that outside corner. But by push pulling that in, that gives me a very defined area to make the line. Okay, push pull. All right, so there is our skirt or apron, whatever you want to call it, or the beginning of it. But of course, I'm going to add some detail to it. So I want to find the center of that. Now watch what happens again. Remember when you try to, remember you go from here and you try to draw a line from an edge like that, it doesn't work. So I can do two things. I can go from the top here and just grab an edge and then just measure it out. Now if I stay on this edge, it's going to tell me where center is. See how it's the indication mark is red. When I hit the center, it turns blue. So I know that that's the center. Now I'm going to go back up to my tools, hit the protractor, click on that mark, go along that edge and hit 90 degrees. Well, that gives me a 90-degree edge. So anytime now if I need to pull a reference line, I'll pull it from the center, and that makes sure that it's 90 degrees parallel to the part. Perpendicular to the part, sorry. So let's create some, I want to do some little patterns in this. I want to do just some arches. So I'm going to go ahead and go, let's say we'll go 10 inches. And let's go another, let's go 7. Same on this side. 10, 7, not 70, 7. All right, and I'm going to go ahead and use our tape measure and pull down to indicate some points. So let's go to 3 and 1.5. All right, so now I've got this grid here, and I want to create some arches with this. So to do that, I'm just going to hit A for arch on the keyboard. And I can just hit these, select these points. And I want this to drop down a little bit more, so let's go ahead and create another line. Arch. Now you can type in numerical values as well, so each of these arches are identical. So again, when you're typing in a numerical value for an arch, it's from the 2 points. Imagine there's a straight line from these 2 points. From the center to the top of the arch is the numerical value that you've entered. So if I wanted, if I go from here to here, and I want this arch to have a 1 inch tall, 1 inch high arch, I just hit 1, enter, and that'll give it the numerical value. And that is, again, if this was a straight line from here to here, the center would be 1 inch tall. I'm not going to do that. That's too much. So let's go 0.5 and do the same thing on the other side. All right. And just pull that out, and then get rid of all of our lines. That looks like a Batman bench. All right, which is cool, but I want to add a little detail to it, some kind of little, just routed edge to sexy it up. So let's go ahead and get rid of one of these sides by hiding it. So just select the component, right-click the mouse, hide, and I'm going to go down to this bottom edge here, and let's see, I want to add some kind of just detail to that. So I'm going to go ahead and tape this out. Let's go 0.5. 0.25, and then arch, and just give it a slight arch there, and let's do a slight arch here as well. It's not wanting to grab a hold of my mark there. Sometimes if you get into those positions where it doesn't want to grab a hold of something, it just takes a little. That's one of the things that's kind of irritating about SketchUp. Every once in a while I get a little iffy about an edge, about grabbing onto an edge. Just mess with it. It'll happen. Now if I were to go ahead and grab this and try and move it or do the follow me tool, these two pieces aren't connected. It would create a goofy line all the way across there, so I'm just going to make a small arch right here. Maybe a little bigger arch. Another thing is with SketchUp is you can really only go down to about a 64th when you're modeling with it. You can't go much less than that. There's what's going on. Okay. This is also something else that happens from time to time. It's pretty easy to get visually screwed up. You see how my lines here? I hope you guys can see that. Get back to the point there. When I drew the tape, when I used the tape measure, it stayed on the parallel line instead of following the 7-degree axes, and that's what I just drew all my lines to. So now this is all out in goofy 3D modeling space, so let's get rid of that. So watch out for things like that. It can happen pretty easily. I'm not used to modeling. I usually use a space mouse, and it's a little bit weird modeling without one. I figured that would just get a little bit too much. A again for arch. It's awfully quiet in here. Any questions, guys?
Nothing in the chat.
Okay. And come on, Izzy. I wonder how many of you guys just use mouses when you're modeling and don't use like mouses designed for 3D modeling. It's got to be a little bit harder. All right, so now what I've done is I've created this profile, and I want that profile to go along all of these edges. So to do that, before I do, I'm going to use the Follow Me tool, but before I do, I'm going to go select everything that I want the Follow Me tool to go along. So I'm hitting just that line, and then I'm going to hit Shift, select that line again. So each one of these lines along here that I want that profile to follow along, I have to select. And I can do that just by holding the Shift key. So now that I've selected all those lines, I'm going to go up to Tools, go to Follow Me, and very carefully go down to that little point there and push pull. And then that'll follow that. I'll get that detail all the way across there. You know, like that, smoothing that edge. So I don't like how...
You have answered for the mouse question.
Yeah.
I have 3 for just a regular mouse, 1 trackball mouse and keyboard, and the other mouse and thumb trackball.
Who is this?
This is everyone. You asked everyone.
Oh, okay.
Mouse.
You guys are using trackballs. That's cool. I wonder, I use a space mouse, which is really, really nice. So I don't like all these lines right here. And so to soften the edges, I'm just going to click on it, triple click on the compart, left click, and go down to Smoothen, Soften Edges. Hit Enter. And I usually don't go much over 20 degrees. That's usually all you ever need to do. But then that gets rid of some of those lines. You see what I'm talking about? So, right. So now we have our benches coming together. You can still see those little lines I kept out in modeling space for moving the part. Let's go ahead and select that. Actually, you know what? A lot of times when you do that, it did happen. You get this little auxiliary edge that pokes out in the world because you selected this outer edge, and when you push-pull it, it push-pulls it right straight through. So sometimes you can just erase that. Sometimes you can't. So see what's happened here? It's erased that part of that right there. So if you get in a position like this where it's getting all wonky on it, again, we're back to using the, let's go ahead and, so we're going to go right back and do the rectangle thing that we did before, but let me go ahead and close that up first. So while this is in modeling space, it's not going to let me do it now. Yeah, that'll work. Okay. So one of the things I'm going to need to do is get rid of all of this junk here. So just go through and hit, while this is in modeling space, triple click on it so everything lights up, and then go back to intersecting faces with selection. Now this works sometimes. Sometimes you actually have to draw out a second knife. So you'll have to, if this doesn't work, then what I would do is basically, just like we did before, draw that surface, use that as a knife edge, and do the same thing as we did before. Looks like it's going to behave itself this time. This is where like Fusion 360 really shines over SketchUp. But once you get accustomed to SketchUp, you really can't. I mean, I've never seen anybody that can model faster in 3D Fusion than can be done in SketchUp. And if it's just for woodworking and you're not doing like highly precise 3D, I don't know, 3D models or engineered parts, SketchUp works really great for woodworking and woodworking plans and layouts. So, where am I at? Unhide all. All right. And then we need to move our let's go ahead and make this a component, because I should have done that a while ago. Make that a component. And move this over. Now I'm going to pull that along. I'm just going to make sure, you probably don't know if you can see it or not, but as long as I keep that move indication line green, and I know I'm pulling that along the right axis, Control for copy, just pull that out to the edge. Now in this case I can just right click on it, flip along green axes, and that's going to make that profiled edge stick out. And then I'm going to give it a little bit of a reveal there, so I'm going to move that back 0.25, enter. So now we have our farm bench with Batman apron all done. Just the basic component.
Question.
Yep.
Jim says, did the follow me bleed into the left leg also, like the right side you just fixed?
You know what, Jim, good question. I didn't check that. Let's check it. It more than likely did, yes. Yeah, because what happened, guys, is when I select this outer edge here, and the, we're designing that, we designed that profile to go through the outer edge, so it's touching that tail edge, and as we push it, it goes through everything. So let's just explode it real quick. Now let's see if this works. So I selected everything. I'm going to use intersecting faces, in this case with model, and let's see if we can erase that there. Nope. And if we can't, we just do the same thing as we did before. Yep, it's going to let us. Awesome. Now it gets a little bit, there's usually always something fairly simple if you can't erase the edge, or there's some little thing that's going on in SketchUp. It's almost always something extremely easy. So it's one of those things you just got to stop for a second, take a deep breath, think about the model itself, what it could be doing, why it would be behaving that way. Let's go ahead and make this switch this back to the component, make the component. So take this out of component, so just click on it, left mouse or left click, explode, triple click to make sure the whole thing is selected, intersecting faces with model. Okay. I got all backwards. So when you're going from certain things like that, if you end up lost for it, don't worry, just go. If you get lost or you're not sure where you're at in the space and you're having a hard time finding your way back out of wherever you're at, which happens, I know it sounds silly, remember that your camera options, you can always just go to camera, you can hit perspective views or standard views, or I'm sorry, hit standard views, and you can select from any one of these options, top, right, bottom, front, back, left, and it'll take you to a certain orientation in the model. And it's a little bit easier to navigate out of wherever you were. So. Right.
Question.
Yep.
David asks, why did it not update the other one when you did that, since they were the same component?
Because I had it out of modeling space. All right, here's the thing. If I have a component like this, all right, and I move it, copy it, all right, now I want to model on it, but I want it to make all the changes on this part on the second part that I just copied. Well, I don't want to explode it, because once I explode it, it makes it its own entity. It's no longer connected to this. So to edit that and still get the same change, I would just triple click on it, which makes it now, it's in modeling space now. So you see how this one lit up and the second one lit up as well. So if I want to go over here and do something to it, like put a circle in the middle of it, you see it happened to the other one now. Okay, does that make sense? So if I wanted to make a change to this and I didn't want it to happen to the other one, I would just click on it, left click the mouse, and hit explode. Now that's its own part. It's no longer connected to this one. So anything I do to this will no longer be reflected on the other components.
So it's an edit component versus explode?
Yes, edit component versus explode component. If I want to make a change to a component and not have it reflected on a copy of that component that I pulled it from, explode it. If you do want the changes to be the same as the other, just hit the edit, triple click on it and edit the component. So let's go ahead and put some color on this thing. Unhide all. So a shortcut for color is just hit B on the keyboard and it'll bring up your color bar. Now you can choose any kinds of colors. Let's go ahead and let's do the top brown, and we're going to make the base brown, and the top's going to be wood. So I can just go down to where it says colors, hit the drop down, let's make glass. So we can do all kinds of things, translucents, all kinds of fun stuffs. And just so if you want it, like here's a quick one. If you want to color this part the same as the leg, but you don't have the wood up, just go ahead and grab the little dropper, and it'll select the color that you want. It'll indicate that. So you can go through and mess around with all the different stuff that you can color things. I typically just use regular colors, and when you're making plans or models, it's just easier. But sometimes it's fun to mess around with them. For instance, wood. This is kind of like a old barnwood kind of look. So that's our part. So basically, you can get some really interesting and complex shapes by using follow me tools and by using the intersecting faces. And that's really the two things that are going to give you a lot more freedom to create more complex joinery and shapes. When you start getting, especially when you start getting out of the parallel lines. And when I said the parallel lines a lot today, and what I mean by that is, let's go ahead and get, what I mean by that is this surface here, okay, that's a parallel, this surface here, and these surfaces here. Now when you're working within these three surfaces, this three-dimensional surfaces, everything's pretty simple and easy because SketchUp likes these surfaces. It'll snap to these surfaces, you can draw on these surfaces, really easy. Now when you start getting something that's off axis of the surfaces, it's really nice to have something that's that is parallel at least in two of these planes. If you can keep an indication mark parallel in two of the planes, you're going to have a lot easier time moving it around than if you are completely off axis. If that makes sense. I hope that makes sense. So, but let's say we take a rectangle like this and we push-pull it, and then we draw a circle on it. And actually, let's Control Z. Let's make this a component, and then create, and we draw a circle on it. So push-pull that through, and create another circle on it. Making more work for myself than I need. And push-pull that through, and then unselect the box. Select everything, intersecting faces with model, and then start erasing all the stuff that doesn't need to be there. You can really get some really interesting shapes, designs, things. There's actually a tutorial on YouTube. A gentleman he uses 3 different profiles that he creates to make a car, and it looks like a car, like the perfect shape of a car. So just by using those things right there, you can get some really fun and interesting, things going on. So in this case, we have this weird looking, looks like a penny purse. So you can get all kinds of different shapes with that, and then you can do the same thing with the follow me tool. So you can get erase, for instance. Let's go circle, draw a line up here, line there. if I was on the thing here. Let's just do it. So this is kind of a fun one, guys. I mean, it's really, you can do all kinds of stuff with SketchUp. It's just a matter of learning some of the tricks, like the off-axes, the follow me, and then again, I always recommend going to Jay Bates's, go take Jay Bates's courses. He does a really great job of very thoroughly going through them. He's pretty fast-paced, so you may have to stop and you may have to stop from time to time and pause, go through whatever. Let's see here. Follow me. So I selected the circle, I hit follow me, and boom. And all of a sudden we have a wine glass. So you can really make some fun, simple, some fun shapes pretty easily with the SketchUp. Who's thirsty? All right. If there's any other questions, I'll take those. You have, let's see. It's got a hole at the bottom. Fair enough. All right, everybody, thank you for joining this SketchUp class. I'm going to stop recording now, and I'll open up the floor for discussion.